Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Businessolver. As a leader in benefits technology transforming the total healthcare experience, Businessolver has studied empathy in the workplace since 2015. And honestly, they've found that empathy has never been more instrumental in attracting and retaining talent. But what does empathy look like? From their survey of more than 3,000 employees in 6 different industries, the results are in. And talent is looking for flexible work arrangements, employers that ease the stigma around taking time off work, and renewed commitments to DEI. Are you ready to infuse empathy into your company culture? Visit businessolver.com/empathy.
The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Welcome to another episode of the Love in Action podcast. We are the only show that explores the powerhouse business principles of love and care for competitive advantage. Hey, glad you're here. Spread the love by sharing this episode with a friend. And if you like the show, we would be grateful if you could leave us a review on iTunes as well. So today, I want to talk to you about workplace empathy. And it's a topic we tackled in the past, so we're bringing it back. You know, this human practice looks a lot different than it did last year. Empathy has become one of the most important play calls in the leadership playbook, if you will. So why do I say that? Well, empathy fosters confidence. It cultivates strong working relationships. And you know what? It shores up resiliency during those uncertain times, like, a pandemic, and maybe even a recession. So from CEOs all the way down to employees on the front lines, there's been this increase in the belief that an empathetic organization will have faster business growth and higher employee retention. So to learn more about how empathy is impacting organizations, I'm going to bring in an executive from one of those top high growth brands that we love to feature here on the show because they closely align with the Love in Action message. Businessolver has been at the forefront of delivering the best benefits administration technology solutions. Since 1998, it has truly been a team sport for these guys to take the field each day with an organizational perspective called the Businessolver Way. It's been the playbook for how they treat each other and how they treat their clients, of course. It's what defines their core values, their core business, their operating principles, their safe environment, and even their common language. So today I'm going to be speaking with Rae Shanahan, who is quarterback, coach, and cheerleader all rolled into one. But on paper, if you want to give her an official title, she is Businessolver's Chief Strategy Officer. And she's responsible for maintaining and enhancing this playbook, which informs Businessolver's business excellence, training, client engagement, and product development efforts. Rae was recognized in 2022 with the Bronze Stevie Women in Business Award for Female Executive of the Year. And Rae now joins us. Pleasure finally to connect with you. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
So Rae, quarterback, coach, and cheerleader all rolled into one. I mean, come on. It's obvious that you're probably a sports fan, right?
Well, yes. And some people may say Shanahan, the last name, might equate to being in that football lore. And evidently there is a connection, a few, fourth or fifth cousin to the Shanahan family that are the coaches. But I'm here because I love the thought of how coaches have to motivate people differently. So here's the example that I like to use amongst our teams is rarely is there a coach that goes out during pregame and spends time, getting the team ready, and then leaves the field during the game and sits and eats bonbons, and then comes back out and says, "How'd we do?" Right? No, coaches are out there understanding each individual player, understanding where they are in their journey, how to get them excited, how to get them motivated. And that's really what empathy is too. It's about understanding the people and where they need to be met.
Okay, since you went there, I'm going to geek out as well on, especially speaking of coaches, because I'm an LA guy, right? I grew up in LA, so that means that I'm a Laker fan by heart. And Lakers had the awesome coach, Phil Jackson. He was called the Zen Master. I mean, talk about getting to learn about your players, what makes them tick, and drawing things out of them that they didn't even know they had inside them. And I know there's some empathy in there as well, because, when Phil was able to get the most out of his players, including Kobe Bryant, when Kobe was like 17 years old, 18 years old, there's a lot of empathy and heart stuff going on there to relate at a deeper level than just X's and O's, right? Right.
Yeah. Well, and empathy isn't just meaning that I'm going to care for this person. No, empathy really, you can have accountability with empathy too. And sometimes you have to have some tough love, and you can still be empathetic when you're not just making people feel good.
Yeah. All right. We definitely let the cat out of the bag here, but let me back up a little bit. And so before we dive into your work and how you do things at Businessolver, we always start the show with this. You ready?
I'm ready.
What's your story?
Which one? I have lots. So being part of an organization that we grew organically from 20 employees in the year 1998 to now over, close to 1,600. I've got lots of stories along the way, but I'll tell you one, and I'm not going to get into the personal life, but I'm going to get into kind of the professional life and what was really meaningful. I got fired by a coach, and I got fired by my dentist in around 2008, and they're kind of related. So the dentist fired me because I wasn't taking good care of my teeth, and I had multiple teeth problems. And my excuse was, I don't have time. I'm working so much. And then a person came into our organization and offered to coach me, and I said, fine, okay, I will. I don't really need it. I know everything I need to know. What's a coach going to help me with? And he noticed that I wasn't very engaged, and he fired me and said, I just don't think that you're ready for a coach right now. And I was like, whoa. So my story is, sometimes you have to face the reality that you're not exactly what you think you are, and have to kind of pick yourself up off the floor. And then I came across a book by the Arbinger Group called Leadership and Self-Deception.
Oh, I love that one.
Prior to that, I would never read a business book because, remember, I knew everything and I didn't need to be coached. So that book about being in the box and out of the box was truly a life-changing moment for me. And it really changed the way that I wanted to approach people, the way I wanted to approach business. And, back to, the purpose of the whole meaning of your heart, of your podcast, about leading with heart. And, that really started kind of our journey also as an organization to embrace empathy and heart in everything we do.
Yeah. Thanks for that story. That's good. That's good. So I introduced Businessolver, earlier, but I want to hear it in your own words, as their chief strategy officer. I mean, how would you describe the company?
Yeah, I describe it by technology with heart.
I love it.
Yes, we are a software development firm. Yes, we create software called Businessolver, and we use that to support our clients and their employees. But what it's really about is, and if you think about employee benefits, people need them. And it's very important because if they are healthy, they're going to be happier and they're going to be more productive in their work. So our focus is on helping our clients' employees make sure that they use their benefits and they have access to the benefits at the right place at the right time. And that's really through our technology.
Yeah. So what drew me to you guys in the first place is your annual workplace empathy survey. And I know you guys have conducted that for several years now. So before we get into some of the findings from this year's survey, maybe start off with some history. And I mean, what's the importance of releasing these findings annually?
Well, we work with an organization called Edelman, and they had always had this thing called the trust barometer. And we went to them and said, we want something like the trust barometer because we want something that we can build on and is really key to our culture. So we were known as Technology with Heart. And they said, let's do empathy. Empathy is something that is not, I mean, if you search for empathy back in 2015, there wasn't much about empathy. Let's be real, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we, found some interesting results over the years, and, we're going on we just launched our 2022 or 2023 survey to the field. And so that'll be our 8th year of doing this annual empathy research.
That's awesome. Okay. So, I always love to speaking to an executive who's looking at the data. Did anything pop up for you that made you go, well, okay, that one got my attention?
Yes. 2 things. Number one, 90% of employees say that they would stay with a more empathetic employer, which I think is important because in this day and age of employee retention, that's a pretty big number that they will stay with an employer that they view as empathetic, even if they were paid more money. And then the second thing is, I believe the number was around 68% of CEOs felt that showing too much empathy could be a sign of weakness, and that they would be seen as weak to their employee population. And so those were the 2 that really, I think, stood out.
What makes that perception be what it is? Thinking that showing too much empathy may be seen as weak or soft and fuzzy. Is it that they may not have the right understanding of what empathy is? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am an amateur psychologist. So, over my 22 years, I may not have a lot of degrees or written a book, but I can tell you I've experienced lots of situations. So my thought on this is many of the CEOs that are out there answering this are probably, I'm at the end of the Gen X, kind of line, or baby boomers. They grew up in a very traditional work environment where, when I started my career back in 1990 at Maytag Corporation, they still required women to wear skirts, pantyhose, and heels. Because I remember I showed up one day in pants and they said, now you're supposed to wear a skirt. And so when we think about so many of the leaders of organizations today, they had their upbringing in those traditional in traditional mindsets. So even if they've evolved, they still, at their core, you still go back to that, that instinct of that ego fight or flight instinct. So even though they've evolved, they still go back to that, I think, many times.
I'm going to jump on that bandwagon and expand it a little bit, okay? Because I'm looking at data now. We're in the DEI age, so it's okay to say this. But in the past, probably back then, hyper masculinity kind of ruled the roost, if you will, and so there wasn't any room for empathy and compassion, those things, to show up because traditionally, male hierarchy and the ways that men led or and were taught to lead over the years, from all the way back to the industrial age, we're still hanging on to those relics of the industrial age, right?
We are.
But now here's what we're seeing. Okay, so women are starting to level out the playing field, which is amazing. And finally, they've arrived, you've arrived. It's still not even, I should say, but at least they're starting to come into the corporate world in more leadership roles. And so I am seeing that feminine traits, which by no means is weak,
right,
are coming into the picture and into the leadership realm. And it's now showing a good example of how to lead, whether you're a male or a female. We're balancing out this hyper masculinity, these traits that came from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, from my grandfather to my dad, and we're seeing more women that are showing up in the workplace. They're introducing us to things like vulnerability and emotional intelligence and transparency, right? And I think that, to me, that speaks volumes to the strength that women bring to the leadership realm.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And when we think about empathy in the workplace, it really is about just appreciating and understanding where people are. I think about one of my favorite Brene Brown videos about empathy is oftentimes we think empathy means helping people and making them feel better. And it's not. Sometimes it's just really sitting in the moment, listening. And as she calls it, just don't silver lining it.
Yeah. We talked a little bit offline about this. I want to bring this up is that I guess that empathy was it was on the decline since last year. And I'm curious to know why that is.
I think it was just like it was up a great deal during 2020. I think that we surveyed right at the beginning of we were doing the survey in 2020, right at the beginning of the people being sent home. And I think there was a lot of empathetic conversations at all levels where everybody's trying to figure out, how do I make this work from home thing work and all of this. And then last year's survey came out right around the time that people were facing. They may be forced to go back into the office. They may be given. So I think that it was a decline in that year from 2020 to 2021, really tied to the uncertainty. And then going from, hey, everything's going great working from home, but no, now you have to be back in the office. You'll be happier if you're back in the office. And that put people in difficult situations.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what comes back out when we do get the latest results out that are out in the field right now.
You told me that more executives have to kind of take on the role of the chief empathy officer. And so I want to touch a little bit on that, and also why frontline managers have to be empathy leaders in the workplace these days. So we're going to unpack that and more after a quick break.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Businessolver. People are at the heart of everything that Businessolver does as a company. Their people share new ideas to improve products and processes that serve their customers, because people are at the heart of everything you do too. Taking care of people is key to keeping up in today's marketplace. In their research, Businessolver found that although empathy at work is on the decline in recent years, managers have never been more instrumental, increasing 25% since the pandemic. More than a third of employees say their manager has the greatest impact on building an empathetic work culture. Businessolver believes that empathy is so crucial to business today, they've been researching it since 2015. Their State of Workplace Empathy study aims to educate people on the evolving meanings of flexibility, diversity, and other drivers of culture. So what are the behaviors, policies, and values of an empathetic organization? Discover actionable data at businessolver.com/empathy.
Okay, so the chief empathy, and it's hard to say, empathy officer. Try doing that 10 times, as fast as you can. So why should CEOs kind of channel their inner chief empathy officer? Why is this role more important, today, more than before?
So even in organizations that aren't overly hierarchical, it's still important that the leadership behaves and shows and really treats people the way those people want to be treated. So again, we have something in our organization called our table, and the E at the end stands for embrace the reverse golden rule. So as C titles we shouldn't treat people the way we want to be treated. We really need to think about really on your side, what's going on in your life. And as leaders, being able to showcase that, I think, is extremely important in organizations. Needs to be done at the top. And really in every layer within the organization needs to focus on empathy.
Yeah. One of those rare traits of empathy that I don't think is exercised often is the ability to listen. I mean, everybody can listen and hear what's going on, right? But to be able to listen with trying to understand what's going on the other side of the fence. So I think that's almost like a servant leadership way of listening, is to meet the needs of the person that you're listening to. So it's not just a transactional listening and hearing, right, and acknowledging, but it's then doing something about it, right? So I think it's kind of empathy a little bit on steroids, where you take it and you make it actionable. So let's bring this conversation to the frontline manager, okay? Because we have so many frontline managers that listen to this show. So Gallup, for decades, has determined that the most important relationship that determines an employee's success, when it comes to an engagement, is the one between the employee and the immediate manager. So let's bring empathy into the conversation now. Why are we seeing employees now are starting to look to the frontline manager? It's almost like an expectation that you have to be an empathy leader these days. Is that true?
I guess I think about it like this. I don't think about it that you have to be empathetic or not. You just should be. That should be how you are as a leader. You need to listen. You need to understand your employees and meet them where they need to be met. And that means more than just transactional conversations and doing the work. So leaders taking time to get to know their employees, having time to open up. We do something every day. I brought this into the organization in, I think, 2012. We started, and we still do. Every department all across the organization does a daily stand-up or a huddle. And we start every meeting with a blue sparkle. It's a whole different story about where Blue Sparkle came from. But when I introduced this first in 2012, my direct reports were like, Rae, nobody wants to talk about anything positive. They don't want to share. This is going to be bad. And I said, all right, let's do this. we're going to do this 21 days. Cause that's how long you're supposed to do something to make a habit. So every day they started stand up with a blue sparkle. And all of a sudden it's like, they told about something in their personal life. They shared something positive that happened yesterday at work. So it grew and it grew. And trust me, it's now been 10 years and we still do blue sparkles every day. And so that's an example of helping people talk about things that are positive in their life and telling their stories and listening to those stories. Those employees feel like they matter and they feel heard.
Yeah. It's funny. You brought up something that, Amy Edmondson studied this and wrote a book on psychological safety. And I think that the two, empathy tell me if this is true, or can empathy happen in a place that does not foster psychological safety? Because to me, if you are in a fear-based pressure cooker environment, I don't know if people have or leaders would venture out to want to be empathetic. No, because they will probably want to control you and basically tell you what to do. And you don't have a voice. Do as I say. But in psychologically safe environments, you kind of set that environment for people to actually express their best ideas, their input. Yes. And I think there's tremendous impact and value in workplaces like that. I don't know, maybe Businessolver is that way, where if you allow people to have input and make it safe for them to do so, right, then you can capture the team's best ideas, suggestions, and strategies that you may not have thought of before.
She's spot on and you're spot on. You cannot have a fear-based environment to foster empathy and foster that heart in the leadership. But that's different. I mean, that is really hard. It's funny. Our CFO, who started here going on 3 years, right at the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah. He early on because even at the leadership team, we go through book clubs, we do Dare to Lead. We've done something called Subtle Acts of Exclusion to learn about, microaggressions. And he's like, this is so touchy feely. I don't like to talk about, our employees as family. And it's like, but why not? We spend so much time together and so much of our formative life is working. Why shouldn't we do that? And he's come around and he's like, I get it. Empathy. I always thought about empathy as being easy on people. And what empathy really is you can have accountability in an organization and still be empathetic. You can have direct, authentic conversations with people and still be, empathetic. We can expect people to do their jobs and still be empathetic.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up the accountability piece, because, you don't want people to assume that by being empathetic, you kind of hand the keys to the inmates of the asylum, right? It's
right.
They're still expected to perform.
Yes.
And you hold their feet to the fire. But by being more empathetic, I think I keep going. The word safety keeps coming up for me. Is you make it safe for them,
right?
to express their best selves and bring their best selves to work. So,
Mm-hmm. And I think we have to model that at the leadership level, that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to admit things, and it's okay to change your mind. There's a concept of, holding your ideas lightly, because something that we may have believed 5 years ago may not be the case now. So I'll talk about like remote work. Prior to the pandemic, we had 200 and some people that worked remote, and around 800 or so that worked in the office, and we were very office centric. Very. CEO at the time, it took basically an act of Congress to get approved to work remotely. And as we got into the pandemic and we saw we already had good employee engagement, but we do this pulse survey monthly with our employees, and we saw basically all of the measures go up. They felt more connected to the business. They felt more connected to their leader. They felt more productive working remotely. He changed his mind, and we are now 100% remote organization. And it's okay. I think that's part of being empathetic too, is just appreciating that it's okay to admit that you make a mistake.
Yeah. That's that part of the leadership evolution is now we're getting into the understanding that to truly lead from the heart is to understand that it's okay to admit your mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes. And if you admit your mistake, you make it safe for other people to say, hey, boss, I messed up as well, without them walking on eggshells and thinking that they're going to, be reprimanded if they make a mistake. We want people to fail forward, right? In order to grow and change.
Right.
And
fail fast. But, there is a fine line. Let's say if we can't keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, that's not acceptable. However, we need to, when we do something wrong, we say something wrong, or we just apologize and be sincere.
Yeah. It's something tells me that it should be human nature to be empathetic and know these things on the inside, but not everybody has the capacity to be able to respond in that manner. Right. And I think that's why leadership is such a, leadership is not cut out for everyone, right? I think that there's a lot of character involved in leadership. Empathy is about character. So I always go back to my clients and say, okay, make sure that you are assessing and vetting your future leaders to be ones that are really good people in general, right? That make good decisions and good judgments, and not just, look at them as somebody that has confidence and executive presence that doesn't hold water anymore.
And just because they were a great individual contributor doesn't mean that they're going to be a great leader. But I do also think that individual contributors can be leaders. They really are leaders of ideas and leaders of processes. So I'm a believer that you don't just have to be a leader of people. You have different ways you can lead in an organization, and use your strengths that way as well.
Good point. So I want to bring up, I want to talk a little bit about generations. Okay. So, every generation that comes into the workforce shapes the culture of work. 10 or 15 years ago, it was all about the millennials,
right?
With, study after study pointing out how to best lead the millennials and all that. So, and now we have Generation Z, the one that came after the millennials, and we're seeing them start to enter the workforce in great numbers. They're now in their early to mid 20s. So how has Gen Z changed the way empathy is seen and talked about in the workplace?
Yeah, interesting. Again, I don't have all the data to back it up, so I'm going to kind of go with some gut here.
Yeah.
How I'm seeing it change in the workplace when we think about bringing the Gen Z and the tail end of the millennials too. They grew up in a digital first culture, and they have lived with their information being read and seen and shared everywhere. And so they really come into a culture already embracing some of the things that we've been talking about, sharing stories, sharing their personal views. And so in some ways they can help foster that culture of empathy by opening up and sharing something that they've been very used to doing, right?
Yeah,
Whereas me coming from the Gen X days and close to a baby boomer, I didn't want to share much about me and share my story because I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about them. But giving a voice and having that in the culture, I think, is extremely important.
Yeah. And I am totally hopeful that this generation, Gen Z, is the one that's going to break the mold of micromanagement and break the mold of all of these toxic workplace rituals that we still cling on to, because, these people are going to be leaders in 15, 20 years.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that they're going to reinvent the wheel when it comes to leading.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a son that's right in that sweet spot of 23, and he's finishing grad school, starting his first job. So it'll be really interesting to hear him, how he approaches that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So being that we are a business podcast,
yes.
we need to elevate this conversation to the financial aspect of it, right? What financial impact, does empathy have on the business? I mean, is there a direct correlation? Do you see it between an empathetic workplace and financial growth, or maybe even higher employee retention?
I definitely do. So I'm going to glance at my notepad because I couldn't remember this for sure. So there's a top 20. I view, let me correlate. I view empathy is core to a culture, and we know that there's positive cultures and there's toxic cultures. So the top 25 culture index said that since 2005, they have had a 1,429.1% financial growth versus compared to the S&P 500 having a 248% growth.
Wow.
So, and that's really directly tied to employees and engaging in the culture and appreciating the culture.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to be banging on this drum. We're not shying away from the fact that we're trying to make a case here that things like empathy actually do translate to business outcomes. Mm-hmm. We're not just cheerleading for empathy. There's got to be a business case attached to it at the end.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And we're a believer that, part of our mission is grow our business, delight our clients. And we know we can't have delighted clients without having delighted and engaged employees. It has to start there. And so all the way through the hiring process, through the onboarding process, through how we reinforce that culture and bring it to life, is key to retaining employees and key to delighting employees. And again, then it's the right thing to do. They'll take care of our clients too. Bingo.
Yeah. All right. So we have, as we wind down here, a tradition on the show where we ask our guests the leadership love question. So in your own words, how do we practically lead with love day in and day out?
Few things. We have something in our organization that we call our table, and the R stands for being response ready. And you talked earlier about how important it is to listen. Most of us as natural, we present as one of three things. We're either acceptors, saying, okay, you said to do this, so I'll go do it. We are tellers. I'm a teller. I have so much to share. I want to tell. And then we have people that they are guessers. So they like to anticipate, and they get their joy out of anticipating. And part of response readiness training is forcing us to be discoverers so that we can listen, because asking questions helps people feel heard and feel like they matter. So that's response readiness. The E or the T stands for build trust through transparency. We all know that having empathy in any kind of, you have to have trust. So being open, being authentic is extremely important. The A, assume positive intent. It's the best way to wake up every day is when you're out driving around and somebody accidentally cuts you off, instead of throwing them the bird, how about if you just say, you know what? They just made a mistake. They were just facing off. Isn't that so much better?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so then the B is be real. We want our employees to show up every day authentic, and it's okay. We can have a bad day. I can say I'm struggling today, and we don't need to fake it till we make it. We can be honest about it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then the L is live a growth attitude. We believe everybody in the organization is in sales, that they support the growth of the organization. And then E is the embrace the reverse golden rule. So my favorite party trick. So snap 4 times and draw a capital E on your forehead. How did you draw it? So if you drew it so that you can read it, then your first reaction is generally to think about things from your perspective. If you drew it so that I could read it, then you're more likely to think about it from the other person's perspective. And I think that came from a Daniel, what is his name?
Daniel Goleman.
Yeah. But it's a great party trick to get going.
Full disclosure, I drew it to read so I can read it myself. And I don't know how.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Because then I think 99% of the population has the ability to be empathetic. And so you just have to remind yourself, your first, if you do it, so you read it, your first, instinct is to think about it. How should I handle this situation, or how should I approach this situation? Versus when you're empathetic, you think about it from the other person's perspective first.
Yeah. I love that you just touched on such great stuff about emotional intelligence and raising your self-awareness. I mean, that's a whole other podcast in itself. So thanks for bringing that up. So before we wrap up here, we have talked a lot about empathy today, but I have a feeling we have barely scratched the surface in the number of insights you have curated over the years. So for listeners who want to dig in more, where would they go to get more information about Businessolver?
Yeah, sure. And of course, website or LinkedIn. So it's Businessolver with 2 S's in the middle, not 3. So BUSI, if I can spell, NESSOLVER.com, and then /empathy to access our library of empathy study information.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I have that in my show notes as well, that you can click on it. So, okay, we bring it home with 2 questions, as we do with every guest. Here they are. Personally, Rae, what's really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
Oh, I'm really worried about the division that we're experiencing in our country, and just the polarized beliefs. And I wish we could find a way to appreciate each other's, again, empathy, appreciate each other's perspective, and not hold ideas so firmly that these long held beliefs continue to cause the division. And, I think that's what really pulls at me, is just the bipolar, the polarized environment that we're in right now.
Yeah, it's totally dysfunctional right now, and how we're doing this, and this whole divisiveness. And I'm looking forward to 2023 being a year, regardless of where we go politically, where people come to the middle and not be so entrenched in left-right kind of dichotomies. We need to come to the middle and sit at the table and be able to listen to the other side. So, finally, our guests close us out with a key takeaway, or maybe a closing remark to keep us inspired.
So, did you ever remember the concept of friendship bread? So you would get a bread starter, and then it would grow, you'd feed it and it would grow, and then you go give it to other people, and then they would grow it and give it to other people.
Yes.
That's what I view. If anybody from Businessolver is listening, they'll die laughing, because I bring this up a lot. But I believe that as leaders, it's our job to cultivate that friendship bread and then spread it throughout the organization. You can start a movement. You're not going to all of a sudden have a great culture. You're not going to all of a sudden have empathy at the core of everything. But we need to work with the willing and use the friendship concept to help spread that awareness and love in the organization.
I love it. That's going to stick with me. Thank you so much, Rae. This has been such an amazing convo. We're much better for it. So if people want to connect with you, is there a place that you'd like to point them to?
Sure. LinkedIn is probably the best place for me. Or my personal email is rshanahan@businessolver.com, and would love to hear from you.
It's been an honor. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes. Thank you. This was fun.
That wraps it up. Thank you, Love in Action Tribe, for joining the conversation. And hey, you can continue the conversation and comment on this episode with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And as I mentioned earlier, look for my show notes on my website, marcelschwantes.com.
I want to thank today's sponsor, Businessolver, for making this episode happen. Leaders who want to motivate their people in today's workplace must realize that empathy is a non-negotiable. Let's continue this conversation by exploring their findings at businessolver.com/empathy.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.